Good morning and welcome to the Morning Scoop for Monday, November 16th. This is your daily Buckeye fix. I'm Tom Orr. The Indiana game is 5 days away, and the game against Michigan is in 26 days. The Buckeyes had an unplanned weekend off when Maryland declined to field the team this weekend due to COVID-19 issues. And in fact, four of the top five teams in the country had the weekend off. Most of those were due to COVID issues as well. But there is some more clarity now, I think, in the college football playoff picture overall. Buckeye Scoop's Bill Greene has been tracking that on the site all season, and he joins me now. Bill, how many teams do you think still have a legitimate chance at making the playoff field right now?
We probably have about 10, Tom, if you get kind of, get very liberal in this and allow for, obviously the Bama, Ohio State, Clemson group, they're clearly winning their in. Notre Dame and Florida are very interesting. I mean, Notre Dame, a pretty easy path to the playoffs. Just got to beat Clemson twice, no problem there. That's the hardest road anybody has in America, So then, Florida's got to beat Bama, and that's, you want to go to the playoffs, that's what you have to do. And then you drop down to BYU and Cincinnati. Where are they at? Indiana, Northwestern, Wisconsin, all undefeated, and all they have to do is stay undefeated and beat Ohio State. They're in. Indiana, big game this week, season-defining game for Indiana this week, at Ohio State. But people don't realize they have a game with Wisconsin in a couple of weeks too, which could really be problematic for them. They finished the season at Purdue. So if they beat Ohio State, which I don't expect them to do, but if they would beat Ohio State here, I don't think it's out of the realm that they could lose to Wisconsin and Purdue, and Ohio State could still get back in it. So, from the Ohio State perspective, you don't want to take that chance. But, I think we can get down to like 10 teams that have a shot if you want to include Northwestern and Indiana and possibly Texas A&M on an outside shot there. USC or Oregon, I can't see those teams in any way going undefeated. Oklahoma State with some confusion and chaos. Are they still in it? Maybe. So there's still a long way to go with this. I guess that's probably the bottom line here when you cut to the chase. There's a long way to go, and there's a lot of stuff that can still happen.
Yeah, the Buckeyes come into this weekend's game against Indiana. It's a top 10 matchup. It is the big noon Saturday, big noon kickoff game. It feels like, this is going to be an absolute classic. And Ohio State, the initial lines came out and they are a 3-touchdown favorite against Indiana. So not everyone is buying the instant classic possibilities this weekend. Bill, right now, who do you think? You just kind of ran down kind of a laundry list of the possibilities. Who do you think right now is the most likely to end up in that top four when the season ends?
Well, I think you have to put Ohio State at the top of the list because I think they can lose the game. I wouldn't advise them to lose this week, but I think a one-loss Ohio State team that somehow wins conference title is in, and they shouldn't lose a game. Like I said, this is probably their toughest game, Tom, I guess, and they're 21-point favorites. So they should be able to walk through this schedule, play bad in games, and win, and get to the Big Ten championship game at least. So I think Ohio State's in a great spot. I think Bama's in a great spot. I don't see a losable game in the regular season for them. They'll play Florida in the SEC title game. I think they can lose that game as long as it's not 35-9 or something like that, and Bama would be in. For Clemson, I think at full strength Clemson will beat Notre Dame, but they better, because a 2-loss Clemson team will not get in, and Notre Dame would get in. Florida, I think the game with Bama will be an absolute first team to 50 wins, and Florida might get that. Florida might be the one team that nobody really wants to play right now. And, we talk Ohio State, Clemson, Bama, only 3 teams in America. I don't buy that. I think Florida, they're going to get their points. So that's where I think it's at right now with those teams. And then I think BYU and Cincinnati, they all need a lot of help and a lot of chaos. But if things would hold true the way I think they're going to go, I think Florida is going to beat Bama. And I think they're both going to make it. And I think Clemson's going to beat Notre Dame. And I think Ohio State's going to walk through. And we're going to have maybe the best Final Four we've ever had with Ohio State, Florida, Bama, Clemson. That's where I think it's going to go.
Yeah, that sounds like two semifinals that could end up with the losing team scoring. There's that great stat that Ohio State is whatever it is, 300 and something and one when they score 35 points. Like, I think you could have two semifinal games where the losing team scores 35 points if it's Ohio State, Alabama, Clemson, and Florida.
I would agree.
Those are going to be, if you like points, those are going to be some entertaining games if that's how that all shakes out. One team that probably is not going to be sitting on the edge of its seat on playoff selection Sunday, is Michigan. They are probably comfortably out of field right now. Bill, did you get a chance to watch any of their game on Saturday night?
I did. I didn't watch it from start to finish because I really figured that I'd seen all I needed to see at an early point in that one. An awful performance. I know they had injuries and, bull crap. You don't get beat that bad. I don't, it's a lack of depth. It's a lack of intensity. They're a poorly coached team. They've got problems. And, in my heart, and I know there's people that closer to Michigan than I am, people that I really like and respect, John Bacon, Sam Webb, good guys, far closer to Michigan than I am. And they are adamant that Jim Harbaugh will be back. And I'm probably on the other side of that fence. I do not think he's going to be back. I think the party is over. They're not going to fire him during the season. They didn't do it to Brady Hoke. They didn't do it to Rich Rodriguez. And this is one of their, favorite sons in Jim Harbaugh. They're not going to embarrass him. He's not going to embarrass them. But I think behind this, there's no contract extension, Tom. His contract is up in 1 year. He is the only Power 5 coach in America whose contract is up in 1 year. So they can throw out all the spin that, well, we're in the middle of a pandemic. We have fax machines, you can get that contract done in about 5 minutes. If he's your guy and you love him, then you offer him 5 years for $43 million. You fax it over to him. He signs it, returns it in 5 minutes. That is not happening. Okay. And signing Jim Harbaugh to a 1 year extension is ridiculous. I mean, he's either your guy or he's not. And the fact that contract just keeps getting closer and closer to the deadline leads me to believe that I think there's going to be an amicable parting where neither party gets embarrassed and looks bad, but he moves on and then they move on and go after, if I'm them, I'm going after Matt Campbell. I'm going to get something youthful, some enthusiasm, some fire, some spark, which they have none right now. I mean, it's a dead, dying, depressing, sad, whatever you want to. And I think it's going to stay that way as long as Harbaugh remains the coach. I think it's over, and it's sad, I guess, from their perspective that it didn't work out. I don't understand why it didn't work out because I've always thought he was a heck of a coach, but it's not working out. And I think it's over.
It seems like a lot of those issues have started with the recruiting. And, you mentioned the issues, the injury issues they've had. And that's something that needs to get discussed in the context of what's happened to them in the last couple of weeks. They've been without both starting offensive tackles. They're without both starting defensive tackles this week. Aiden Hutchins and Kwity Paye, those are two really good players.
Sure.
Without both of those guys. But, Ohio State, if Ohio State's missing a couple starting defensive ends, they have other defensive ends they can plug in that are like high tier, Big Ten caliber. As soon as that first tier of guys is out for Michigan, it's like the talent level just goes off a cliff. And 6 years in, this is not, oh, well, I inherited a roster that's not up to the level that 6 years in, this is all on you. And as Brady Hoke's guys have sort of filtered out of the program and it's been all Harbaugh's guys, the talent level has kind of has dropped and the depth just hasn't been there. That seems like it's one of the most damning indictments of his time at Michigan is that the talent not only hasn't gotten better, in some cases, it seems like it's gotten worse.
Well, it has. And if you look at, the Ohio State-Michigan matchup, it wasn't that long ago that Ohio State was an underdog on their own field to Michigan. And that wasn't 10 years ago. That was a couple years ago with Dwayne Haskins. They were the underdog that day and beat them by 100. And that's, there was the game where JT Barrett's fighting for a first down that he got by an inch, or he was short by an inch. That was an even game. That was in Columbus. And that game was right to the wire, overtime even. Well, they're not going to the wire now. You're not going to see an overtime game between these teams now. It's a joke. The past two scores have been just complete destructions. And then you see they get pretty much dominated by Michigan State, who might be one of the worst teams in the country. And like you said, the needle is pointing downward. The recruiting he was left, I think, with better players from Brady Hope than what he has right now on this roster. And that's on him and his staff. So to me, I think the party's over. I think they find a way to have an amicable split where nobody gets embarrassed and he moves on. And you think, my first thought is that he could never go back to the NFL, that who would hire him? But then you look at some of the coaches in the NFL, Tom. I mean, Adam Gase has a job. Anthony Lynn has a job. So, hey, there probably is a place for Jim Harbaugh in the NFL when you look at his resume and past success he had with the 49ers.
Yeah, when the question is, who would ever do that? Well, the Jets are still a franchise. So never say never when the Jets are still a thing. From a dead coach walking to a dead period, the NCAA just extended the dead period in recruiting from December 31st to April 15th. This is a huge deal, and it didn't get a ton of attention at the end of last week. So, Bill, I mean, this obviously applies to every recruit from every class, but can you explain what this means specifically for the players in the class of 2021?
Well, they will have gone all of 2020 and all the way up to the second signing period with no visits. That's almost unheard of for these kids to have to make the biggest decision of their lives without a key piece of that decision process. But this is recruiting in a national pandemic, and this is the way it goes. So I think it really, it's a big piece of the puzzle for these kids in figuring out what school they want to go to, and it's been taken away from them. So, I feel for them. The kids at the top, who would be visiting your Alabamas and Ohio States and that, and they're not going to be able to do that. And then, Tom, you also have those kids that are fringe, borderline recruits who needed to go to camp last summer, to be seen. And then they needed an official visit, to actually form a better relationship, with these college coaches. JT Tuimoloau, I was getting called every night of the week, Zoom meetings, everything. He's fine. But that kid that maybe Western Michigan or Ball State or Akron gotten to know him just a little bit better and spent a weekend with him and thought, dang it, we got to have this kid in our program. That's not happening. So the fringe kids get hurt just as much as the Emeka Egbuka and J2 Tuimoloau do. And that's what really bothered me was some of these kids, couldn't go to the camps being canceled. It was a real killer for the fringe kids. And then also not being able to go on these visits where they could really cement that relationship. And it hurt, you can go from the 5 stars down to the 2 stars, and everybody got affected by this in that 2021 class.
Yeah, it does feel like there might be something of a lost, a group of kind of like guys who just sort of got lost in the shuffle who would have earned an offer at camp last summer, whether it's a, FBS offer or a Power 5 offer or a really elite program offer, who just never got that chance. And they're just, it's the old sliding doors thing. Like, well, your life could have been one way this way, and instead it's turning out another way. And you do wonder if that's going to play out in a very, very active transfer market in a year or two when, when Ohio State looks at the kid who ended up at Kent State or Akron or Toledo or wherever, who might have earned a camp offer normally. A year or two from now, if that kid's all MAC after his first year, you wonder if he might end up at Ohio State or Michigan State or somewhere else after that. Eventually the cream does rise to the top, even if it takes a little longer. You mentioned a couple names there that I think are really kind of an interesting, that I'm sure the abstract with the lower level prospects and what could be and couldn't be is kind of a really impactful thing on a broad scale, but just in the very narrow focus. I mean, you mentioned Emeka Egbuka and JT Tuimoloau, a pair of 5-star prospects from Washington. Ohio State seems like they're in relatively decent chance for both of those guys as they look to finish this class strong. Does the extension of the dead period help or hurt the Buckeyes' chances with those two guys?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, it's almost an impossible one to answer. You have to think that if you have the lead, which I'm very, very sure they had the lead with Egbuka, and I'm kind of sure they had the lead with Tuimoloau, you almost think that it's probably a benefit for Ohio State that these guys can't tour the country and, spend time on other campuses. But the flip side of that is that the Ohio State success rate late in the process, when they do get a kid on their campus, is really high, even if that kid is being recruited by Bama or Clemson or whoever you want to name. So, I think if Ohio State had their choice here, I think they'd take their shot at, bringing the kids on the campus, but then allowing those kids to go elsewhere as well. Because like I say, over the years, the Ohio State hit rate on those late official visits is pretty staggering how successful they've been. But I think they're in good shape for both of those kids, Egbuka especially. But I think they're in good shape with Tuimoloau as well.
Now, in the case of some other guys who we've kind of heard rumblings about as potential additions or flips, I mean, like linebacker Raesjon Davis, for one example. I mean, you may have other examples in mind as well. What does this mean for Ohio State's chances of landing those guys?
Well, you'd love to be able to get Raesjon Davis on campus for 48 hours. You would love that one. Al Washington has a great relationship there with the father and the player himself. So I'm not ruling that one out yet. But, boy, you'd sure love to be able to have him come and spend that time in Ryan Day's office, meeting with Ryan Day, meeting Mickey Marotti, sitting down with the Ohio State academic people, socializing with this team all weekend. You'd love to have that. And I'm still not ruling him out for Raesjon Davis. There's a lot going on down in LSU right now, and I think they're a vulnerable program for Ohio State to attack, even without an official visit. So I'm not ruling that one out yet. Not going to sit here and tell you that Raesjon Davis is a lock or heavy possibility, but that door's open. So let's see. It's a long way off yet. There's a lot can happen in the next month.
Yeah, if one lesson has come through this year, it is hang tight. Everything's going to change in 2 weeks. That's seems to be the lesson that you should probably take from pretty much every facet of life right now, and recruiting is definitely part of that as well. Bill, thank you for joining us this morning. We will have quite a week of coverage this week, leading up to. Got to tell you, this did not look like the biggest game on the Buckeye schedule when it first came out in September, but here we are, top 10 Indiana coming to Columbus on Saturday. We will have a ton of coverage all week. We'll have an Indiana beat writer on a little bit later on in the week to kind of preview the game from the Hoosiers' perspective, and plenty of coverage on Buckeye Scoop. Should have our normal assortment of Ryan Day interviews and player interviews and all that kind of stuff this week to help get you ready for what is suddenly shaping up to be a very big game at the Horseshoe on Saturday. So you can find that all at BuckeyeScoop.com. If you are not a member, this would be a great time to join us. We have an absolutely incredible team of insiders covering recruiting, all sorts of great insider analysis on this year's team, just a ton of great information. Basketball season. All of a sudden, basketball season's here. Ohio State just landed a big recruit in basketball as well. Our Mick Walker was all over that one. So yeah, make sure you check that out at BuckeyeScoop.com. Consider becoming a member today. Thank you guys for listening. Have a great day. We will talk to you tomorrow.